wise woman told me years ago, she said, Jordan, self-worth is inherent. It is not measured. Self-worth is inherent. It is not measured. Our self-worth is our birthright. It is natural to us. It is not something we need to measure or externalize to the outside world. However, this is something most all of us do habitually. We externalize our self-worth to the success of our businesses, or the success, if we're parents, the success of our children. We externalize our self-worth to the size of our bank account, or the size of our house, or the car that we're driving. We externalize our self-worth to the reflection we see looking back at us in the mirror, or the number of likes that our most recent social media post got. We externalize our self-worth to all these changing factors that ebb and flow day in, day out. And so our self-worth ebbs and flows up and down. My father absolutely externalized his self-worth. For him, it was to his business. He owned and operated a small printing company. And fortunately for him and for our family, that business was successful for most of my life. However, any time that the business struggled, that struggle was mirrored in my father's self-worth, and thereby mirrored in his mental health. And so this is what happened back in 2013. My father's business struggled. He lost one of his biggest clients, and this sent him spiraling downward into the throes of depression, and ultimately cost him his life. His self-worth was so inextricably tied to the success of his business that he couldn't see the forest for the trees when the business struggled. He didn't value himself or allow himself to feel or realize a worth that was independent of that business. Now, for me, it was similar. It wasn't a family business. It was my career as a musician. And as many of you know, I didn't sing out loud until I was 27 because my social anxiety was so great. But I'd wanted to be a singer-songwriter since high school, so my self-worth was non-existent basically throughout most of my 20s. When I finally did sing out loud at 27, I felt really good about myself for a couple months. And then quickly that marker, that finish line, it just sort of naturally extended further, and now just singing out loud, it wasn't good enough. Now I needed to get a band together and tour around. So I did that, got the band together, Fiction 20 down, we started touring around, and that felt good for a couple months. But again, the marker kept moving, the finish line kept moving further and further. And now I needed to tour nationally, because I could only feel good about myself if I toured nationally. And so I did that. I accomplished that goal with my bandmates. We toured nationally. But quickly that wasn't good enough. And again, the finish line moved further. Otherwise, I couldn't feel good about myself. I couldn't feel any sort of self-worth. And so then I had to play bigger shows with bigger bands, so on and so forth, until I finally arrived at this marker of my self-worth that was going to finally do it for me, and that was to sign with a big-time music manager. This is probably similar to what signing with a record deal, signing with a record label was in the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, very often, it can be a great marker of success if you sign with a music manager. But for me, it wasn't just a marker of success, it was a marker of my self-worth. And so my bandmates and I achieved this back in 2014. We signed with this music manager with a great resume based out of New York City. I will respect his privacy, so I'm not going to list his clients, but suffice to say they were top-notch clients whom everyone has heard of. And so we made the decision to sign with this manager. And we entered into an arrangement whereby we paid him a monthly retainer in exchange for him using his knowledge, his connections, his resources to really take our career to the next level. And he promised as much in a letter of intent that laid out for us worldwide success. So we were beyond excited. This was it, right? So I felt great about myself. Ultimately, what ended up happening was the music manager took $30,000 from us and delivered absolutely nothing. This happened at the exact same time my father fell ill with a bout of depression that ultimately cost him his life. And so at that same time, my father's business ultimately failed. And so within this isolated 3 to 4 month period, my family business failed, my father passed away, and my dreams to become a professional musician or a successful musician or whatever this version of musician that I had created in my head for all intents and purposes, had failed as well. And so all these markers of my externalized self-worth, the stability of my family, the financial stability of my family that had provided for me for most of my life, and my career, my dreams to be a singer-songwriter, they were all just wiped away. And I had nothing left to do there amidst that rubble of my life but to turn my attention inward. And so ultimately that time period proved to be the greatest blessing of my life. I had no other distractions external to myself to mark or to hang my self-worth on. So I had to turn my attention inward. And here, in that space, I realized, one meditation at a time, that my self-worth is indeed inherent. And it was there all along. I just was so focused outwardly that I was blinded to that truth. My mom told me somewhere in my 20s, and she said to me, "Jordan, get out of your own way." And that absolutely frustrated me at the time. In fact, it infuriated me. We were in the middle of a fight. She said that to me. And I can remember stomping off and mumbling some smart comment underneath my breath, but those words stuck with me all these years until I lost my dad and I started to meditate, and I really started to understand what it meant to be in your own way. How your brain could be in the way, focused, so focused outwardly, brain so focused on any external marker of success, of self-worth, so outwardly focused that it blinds you, that it blinded me from this truth that was right here all along. It blocked me, it blinded me, it was in the way of my realization that my self-worth was inherent, not measured by anything external, not measurable. That was a misperception on my behalf. My self-worth was inherent all along, and this has been the journey of meditation for me, this realization that self-worth is inherent, this shifting of my perspective from outward first to inward first. It's been this journey from thinking my way through life to really feeling, sensing, intuiting my way through life. It's been this journey in many respects from head to heart. And so perhaps keep that in mind. Maybe those words will, in some respect, mean as much to you as they have to me. Self-worth is inherent. It is not measured.